Jim Morrison, the lead singer for The Doors, a rock music group, is dead. He was 27.
The mood I get for most of it is kind of a heavy, kind of a sort of gloomy feeling, you know, like of someone not quite at home, or you know, or not quite relaxed and, you know, aware of a lot of things, but not quite sure about anything. You know, I'd like to do one just feeling of being totally at home.
50 plus years even after his death, Jim Morrison's demise is still shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. At the peak of his powers and only 27 years old, Jim's premature passing was another blow to the music industry that had become far too familiar with such tragedy. 1970 was rough for music, as two members of the 27 Club, both Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, would pass within weeks of each other. And within 1 year of losing both Hendrix and Joplin, Jim Morrison would unfortunately follow suit, but the question remains, what really happened? The year was 1971, which was a very eventful year for music. Everybody was getting used to a world where the Beatles were no more, Queen was getting acclimated to the music game, and the Doors were busy wrapping up what would be their final album with all of them together, L.A. Woman. After the recording of L.A. Woman was complete, Jim would tell the rest of the band that he was going to go to Paris to join up with his girlfriend Pam. This idea was, of course, welcomed by all the Doors, as Jim can relax and take it easy in Paris, France. Now that their work is all done, he can go there and relax for a while. Jim loved Paris. A lot of French writers that inspired Jim spent time in France. He enjoyed long walks while he was there, shaved his beard, lost some weight, and overall it sounded like Jim just enjoyed being in Paris. It's to be noted it wasn't just a burned-out musician seeking relaxation. Jim was trying to kick a really bad alcohol addiction, as well as a looming verdict for a potential indecent exposure charge that would have jailed him for 6 months if he was guilty. Based off the reports from that night, Jim likely would have been not guilty, but the point still stands. Jim had a lot of stuff on his mind as he was going to Paris. But most importantly, of course, was being with his girl in a city that he loved. Jim was only in Paris for a mere 3 months, from March 1971 to July 1971. He was in Paris, and on July 3rd he would pass, but the question has always remained, how? The following is possible theories and speculation as to the confusing death of Jim Morrison. This is not meant to point the finger as it is to anyone specifically, but more so serve as an educational deep dive into what could have happened to Jim Morrison. Now, according to Jim's then-girlfriend Pam, here is what happened on that night. They saw a movie and returned home to their apartment. Pam went to bed that night as Jim stayed up listening to music, trying to suppress a cough that he had gotten throughout the day. Jim had tried going to bed after some time, but eventually elected to take a bath. The 50-plus years that Jim's been gone, the one thing that stayed the same, the one constant, is where Jim was found. It's always been the same answer. He was found in his bathtub. 6 a.m. on July 3rd, Pam woke up to see that Jim Morrison was not next to her. He was not there. She was calling his name, and he was in the bathroom still. The bathroom door was locked. Pam eventually found her way in to see that Jim was submerged in water. Pam called the fire department and the police, but it was too late by the time they got there, and the official cause of death was ruled as heart failure. Just a few days after his passing, the Doors manager Bill Siddons flew to Paris to attend the funeral for Jim Morrison as he knew about it, and here is where it begins to get a little bit fishy. Pam and her close friend Elaine were the only people that saw Jim's body before the closed casket funeral. The manager, Bill Siddons, did not see the body of Jim, which led Ray Manzarek to question him as to how he even knew Jim was in the casket to begin with. Upon the public hearing about Jim's passing, the examining doctor who looked at Jim's body did not have a legible signature, nor did Pam even remember what his name was. There was no priest at the funeral, and Pam allegedly told the American embassy that Jim had no immediate family that could attend the funeral, even though both his parents were alive and well. According to Doors insider Danny Sugarman, his theory is that it was an accidental overdose, and according to Danny, Pam was doing heroin but told Jim it was coke and downers, which made sense because Jim apparently was not big on hard drugs or needles. According to Sam Burnett, who was a manager of a club that Jim used to frequent in Paris, France, Jim overdosed on heroin in a bathroom stall of his club, and to prevent the bad publicity that would have came with it, they merely took his body across the street to his flat, put him in the bathtub, and he was found dead there. The Doors insider Danny Sugarman echoed similar sentiments to Sam, except he thinks that Jim overdosed in the bathtub itself, Jim merely ran it for himself and died of a heroin overdose while he was in the bathtub. Speculation still lives on as to what happened to Jim Morrison, perhaps even a staged death considering he had talked about doing that many times in his life. Do you think Pam had more to do with Jim's death and she was leading on? Do you think Jim faked his death? Do you think Jim passed away in the nightclub? Let me know down below in the comment section what you think actually happened to Jim Morrison.